Welcome to The Wonder, exploring perspectives, rituals, and observances of modern, naturalistic, earth-revering, pagan religious paths. Here are your hosts, Yucca and Mark.
Welcome back to The Wonder, Science-Based Paganism. I'm your host, Mark.
And I'm Yucca.
And today we are celebrating Atheopagan Day, which is the anniversary of when our community first started.
Online community.
Yes.
Yep.
The founding of our Facebook group, which is where most of our community engages online, 2012. So as we're recording this, it's the 11th anniversary of the founding of that community. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the history and how things have changed, what we're doing now, and what we're looking towards in the future.
That's right. And it's been a lot. Right?
Yeah, it really has. It's been such a beautiful ride. I mean, obviously there have been setbacks and frustrations and all the rest of that, but mostly it's just been so heartening to see and feel this community come together in all the wonderful ways that it is.
Yeah. And it's 11 years is really hard to believe. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I was saying before we started recording, in neo-pagan years, that's even more. It's like dog years or something.
Yeah.
Because the culture evolves really quickly.
Right.
You know, in the time that I've been involved in neo-pagan circles, which started in 1987, we've had at least 3 distinct phases of development within the community in terms of changes in perspective and paradigm, just really transformational things that have happened from the sort of loosey-goosey, still, not very clueful about things like consent, late 60s, all the way up to today.
Right.
So pretty cool. 11 years, a lot can change.
Yeah. And I think a lot really in the last 4 years, 5 years, at least that I've been witnessing, it seems like there's been such a shift in a lot of, not just within kind of our smaller subset of the pagan community, but the larger pagan community, and also a little bit of the general cultural attitude towards something like paganism.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely been a big shift since I was a kid, thinking back on it, it's a normal, in a lot of ways, it's a very normal thing now. I know there's definitely areas of the country that's not the case, but on kind of a big scale, it really has, the level of acceptance has grown.
Yeah, and I think there are certainly entities and figures that are not us that contributed heavily to that. I mean, like the Lady Liberty League, for example, which pressed the U.S. military to recognize Wicca as one of the symbols you could put on a gravestone in a military cemetery. Getting them to recognize any pagan religion was really like pulling teeth, and they pushed on it for about 20 years before they finally got it.
Yeah, right.
And more representation in mainstream media, all that kind of stuff has really helped.
Yeah. So I think it's fascinating to see, or to really reflect on the changes within our community and how those are influenced from outside sources, and the influence that we've had as well, and all of that is, I mean, somebody should do their dissertation on that. Right? I think that would make a fascinating one.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Yeah, there's so much to say about it, but why don't we go back to the beginning?
Right.
And start there and just kind of, work our way forward. So Atheopaganism started out as an idea that I had for myself.
Yeah.
I'd been involved with the local pagan community for a very long time, had some really off-putting experiences in the late 90s, early 2000s that reinforced to me how much capital B belief had become important in the pagan culture, and which had not been true when I first joined.
Mm-hmm.
And as an atheist pagan, I was feeling really oppressed by this. And then it got to the point where I was offended by it, because there were a couple of circumstances that I saw where the will of the gods was used as an excuse for some really horrible behavior.
Right.
And I left.
Mm-hmm.
But within 6 months, I mean, I was depressed. I missed my rituals, and I missed my altar, and I missed my friends, and I missed celebrating the seasons, all that kind of stuff. So I started thinking, well, what is a religion really, and what do they do for us, and how can I get that stuff without having to subscribe to a bunch of supernaturalism?
Mm-hmm.
And I started working on an essay, and this was in 2005. And the essay was done in 2009. And that was what eventually became my book that came out in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
About, first of all, about kind of my journey through this, and the science, the neuroscience, and the confirmation bias, the various fallacies, apophenia, and, all those phenomena that tend to make us fooled by our senses.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second part of the book was laying out, okay, well, taking as a given that the value that for me is going to be about revering the earth. How can I practice a pagan practice around the wheel of the year that doesn't involve anything supernatural or culturally appropriated?
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote all that up, and it was a 40-page essay. And I was ready to happily go trotting forward, using my little model for myself. But I had conversations with friends.
So the essay had been just more of a way of you to clarify your thoughts, right, and
Yes,
work through those ideas, and you just the writing of it was how you worked through these ideas.
that's right. I mean, I'm a writer, and that is the way that it's like having an internal narrative.
Mm-hmm.
As I explored these ideas on paper or in bits,
As you explored in
yes,
writing.
in writing, new ideas would occur to me, new connections would occur to me. And so that's just the modality that I use in kind of framing my thinking about things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as I said, I was ready to go trotting forward with my little practice that was for me. But when I had conversations, and so I re-engaged the local pagan community, understanding that I was going to be myself, and not to be rude about it. If I go to somebody else's ritual and they're invoking gods, I'm not going to say anything about it.
Sure, yeah.
But the rituals that I conduct, that I invite people to, were going to be, godless, non-supernaturalist kinds of rituals.
Mm-hmm.
And in the course of these conversations, I started having people say, well, don't tell anybody, but actually that's really kind of what I believe too.
Yeah.
And you really ought to put this essay up on the internet, and, get some comments on it, get some discussion started around it. And in 2009, I did that. I put it up on Scribd.
I remember that. Yeah.
Remember that? It still exists. There was a time when Scribd was a place that you went for papers and documents and
Yep.
stuff.
It was the place for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And started getting some feedback, and, having more of these conversations where people were confiding in me that, a non-theist or non-literal theist way of orienting to paganism was theirs. And this particularly skewed towards people who were scientists, who were educators, who were engineers, a lot of folks that had that grounding in the scientific method and critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
They were the ones that were not subscribing to supernaturalist myths so much,
Right.
interestingly enough. So what happened was there ended up being enough of these people that I started realizing, this thing has legs. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just for me. It's resonating for other people, and they should have access to it too. And I need to stop here and say, I had a major research failing during the time when I was researching all the stuff for this essay, because I am not the first non-supernaturalist pagan. There
Right.
are other people that were doing that and that were on the internet, and I just didn't find them.
Hmm.
So I kind of reinvented the wheel. And that's an interesting thing about non-theist paganism, is that it seems like that happens quite a bit. People sort of come to this conclusion on their own.
Hmm. That was the family, that was what I was raised with,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it had never, there was no like, there was no word or identity to distinguish. That was just what we were, right?
Yeah.
And it had never occurred to me to search that up, something like that, until a little bit later on, which we haven't quite gotten to that
Uh-huh.
in the story yet. But encountering that the belief part where, later on I'd be publishing things, making YouTube videos or things and having people just furious with me that like, how dare you call yourself a pagan if you don't believe in the
Yeah.
the gods, literally, and just being completely perplexed because that was not the paganism that I had grown up with.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I was just like, what are you talking about? I have no like what?
Right.
You
Yeah.
wait, you're taking this literal? Are you sure? Okay.
Uh-huh.
Right? That was where I was coming from with
Yeah.
that because I hadn't, I mean, I'm interrupting you a little bit with this, but you talked
No.
about like the three different phases or like the epochs that you've
Mm-hmm.
seen. Um, and I think that one of them was this influx of a lot of new people into paganism, bringing with them these expectations from some of the more mainstream religions, in which faith is a major component. And I think that that Christian faith idea was brought in.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. And that came in the late 90s up until around 2000. And that really, really changed how paganism was practiced and conceptualized
yeah,
within the community, at least as I experienced it.
and the atheopaganism was, I mean, it was still happening on the internet a lot. And when the group was founded, that was still the the culture of paganism as a whole. Like on the big scale, there's lots of people being really into the literal belief. But I think we're moving out of that to a certain
Mm-hmm.
extent. That that's there. There's still areas that believe that. There's still like traditions in that way, but that the larger community overall is less worried about that.
Yeah, I think so. And I certainly hope so. I mean, one of the things about paganism is that it tends to be very inclusive and tolerant and pluralistic. And so there are lots of different kinds of practices and perspectives that fall under the pagan umbrella, right?
Hmm.
And I think that increasingly, especially over the last 4 or 5 years, the idea of non-theist paganism has become yet another one of those identities that's just accepted as being a
Just
part of
one
the
of them.
bigger
Yeah.
mix. Yeah,
I
a
mean, there's
part of the
still
bigger
people who get
mix.
very, very upset about it and want
Yeah,
to do
there
their
are.
gatekeeping. But I definitely saw a shift in the last few years that the Pagan Perspective channel was running. Like in the first few
Mhm.
years, I would get a lot of real, like, really
Blame.
upset commenters about it. And then in the later years, more people being like, "Oh yeah, I do that too. Yeah, yeah, that me too, me too."
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I really think that's so. And I mean, one of the core questions, I mean, maybe we can do an episode at some point about validity and
mhm.
the nature of realness, because this is often the argument that's made. Well, it's not real paganism, or it's not a real religion. And to me, those are meaningless
It
questions.
it just comes down to how you're defining it. Like you're just gonna
Yeah.
choose to make it real the way that you like it. Your way of pagan is the real way, right? I remember having disagreements with people going, well, if we go back to, Rome, and this is where, the history of the word pagan, well, the people who were the pagans, they believed in multiple gods, and but my argument would be, okay, but why are you making that your criteria?
Yeah.
Why aren't you making the criteria that they lived in the countryside and spoke like Latin. Like, how about, why is that the criteria? I mean, because we've had so many different criteria for what makes somebody a pagan over the years. Like, you're just selecting that one specific thing to say that that's what makes somebody pagan. Why isn't something else also valid?
Right.
Well, I mean, the
And
answer is because then they don't get to gatekeep it and feel special. But,
right. And particularly this goes to the sense on people's part that old traditions are somehow more valuable or more valid or more real, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a principle that I reject. I think humans have been evolving culture and ideas and technology and skills for our entire existence. And there are things that we can gain from modernity that we don't find in ancient cultures that are of value.
Right. Yeah. That the
So,
value isn't inherent in whether it is old or new or whichever, right? Is it
right,
relevant to us now, right? Does it?
which is one of the reasons why I reject the Bronze Age, Christianity models, is
Mhm.
that I don't think they fit very well in a modern society.
Yeah.
And the more people try to shoehorn modern society into it, the more oppressed we get. So, you know.
Right.
So anyway, this was
Yes.
starting to be a thing. It had
Right.
legs. And it seemed like the next natural thing would be to find a convening place where people could come and be
Mhm.
together and discuss this stuff. Facebook was the natural choice at that time.
Right. That was there weren't as many of the other platforms as there are now.
Right.
Right. That was basically the social media platform for being able to have conversation, other than perhaps Reddit, maybe. But
Yeah,
Reddit has its own kind of interesting culture.
it does. It does. And the thing about Facebook was that you could create a closed group, a private group,
Hmm.
so that you could have some control over what kinds of folks came in. So you knew that they were actually people who shared your values and were there for a legitimate exploration of, what this practice is, what
Hmm.
this philosophy is, all that stuff.
So you weren't
Um,
getting trolls as much, or
no,
people coming in from different religions that, just wanted to prove a point or something like that.
in the 11 years since the Facebook group was founded, we have had precisely 2 people who have slipped in and started proselytizing Christianity.
Hmm.
And they have been quietly removed, and that's been it.
Okay, I've never noticed them.
Yeah, they didn't last long
Yep.
because we have moderators, and the moderators, our philosophy is to use a light hand and to be encouraging and guiding rather than oppressive. But nonetheless, when somebody comes in and starts proselytizing, that is a hard no in our rules,
Yeah.
and off you go.
Also, just to chuckle it, I've always thought the strategy of let me quote from a book that you don't believe in at you to try to convince you.
As evidence.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, okay, cool.
It's so circular, and they don't see it. They just don't see it. Well, no, this is God's word. No, it's not.
But
Not
if
to
I don't
me.
accept your premise of there being a God to begin with and that this is his word, like, why would that hold any weight for me?
That's right. That's right.
So,
So August 5th, 2012, the Facebook group is created, and I invited a handful of people that I thought would be philosophically aligned out of my friends within the pagan community. And then we started to get knocks on the door of people who wanted to join. And we had application questions that we could review. We asked them why they wanted to be a part of the community. We stipulated what our value set was and said, do you affirm these values? We're pro-feminist, pro-environment, anti-racism, anti-fascist, pro-environment, those kinds of things that
mhm.
we've listed. And, we make them sign, yes, I will affirm these values. I think that's probably kept a lot of right-wing trolls out of our group because they aren't willing to sign on to that.
Mhm.
It's not infrequent that we get applicants who will answer the first and third question, but not the one about values, and they don't get admitted.
Mm.
That's just how it goes.
I have to admit, I don't remember filling any of that out when I joined, but I clearly had to have. I think I joined in like maybe 2016 or sometime around there, and I just don't remember. I'm sure I did. I just have no memory of it like being
A
like I
thing.
must have just been like, "Oh, of course, yes, yes,"
Yeah.
because I don't remember it being a thing.
Facebook questions, I think they only allowed one Facebook question for a long time, one admission question, and it's expanded to 3 now. So there may only have been one.
I
But
probably just read through it and went like, "Of course, great! I'm so
yeah,
excited. This group exists." So
and I knew who you were, so I admitted you right away.
yeah.
So that, that helped. So the group began to grow, and it became 100 people, and it became 200 people, and it became 500 people, and it became 1,000 people. And now it's close to 5,000 people who are interested in this path. And we have very high participation in a given month. Usually 2,500 to 3,000 of those members will do something
Hmm.
in the way of reacting or commenting or posting. And of course, you've got your lurkers, but it's very common for somebody to jump in and say, "Hey, I've been a lurker for 3 years, but now I have a thing to say."
Hmm.
And it's just a lovely environment. It's safe. People support one another. There's kindness. There's very thoughtful discussion. People post really interesting stuff. It's worked out really well. And now, of course, we've spun off into having a Discord server as well, while growing the movement in a bunch of ways, like this podcast.
Right. Which we started talking about together at the end of 2019. We
Mm-hmm.
didn't we didn't get it going
We
till a couple
waited.
months in.
We waited for the pandemic and then got started.
We had a few episodes and then it was two or three or something, but it was
It
fast.
wasn't many. Yeah, it happened really fast.
Yeah.
And ironically, the pandemic actually forced us to do some good things in the community. We started doing Zoom mixers, first
Hmm.
once a week and now twice a week. And there are other gatherings as well.
I think that's when a lot of growth of people coming into the community happened too, because
Yes.
people were searching online for that connection because they didn't have the in-person things. And then, wow, here was this community, and that's so much happened during the pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The population really mushroomed. And of course, at the same time, at that point, I had been working on Atheopagan stuff from the beginnings of the essay. And then in 2019, late 2019, my book was published, which was an
Mhm.
expanded version of the essay with
Which
more
is when
resource
our
material and so
friendship had
forth.
kind of started, because we'd met before. But do you
Right.
remember I helped you with the formatting on that?
I do.
Because
Yes.
I took it and out of they weren't accepting whatever format it was that you had, and so you had it in Word, and I put it in InDesign and
Yeah.
reformatted it and exported it,
Right. Yeah.
and
Which
that's
I really
why we got
appreciate.
the connection to then when we started talking about doing a podcast. It was like, oh yeah, yeah, this is a good connection. Let's try this.
Yeah. Yeah. So the book happened, then the podcast happened. And by that time, it had been almost 15 years of working on this in one way or another for me.
Hmm.
And I was looking at this community that was now thousands of people and thinking, well, okay, clearly this is something that has some real resonance, and it needs to not be about me.
Right.
It needs to be, a self-governing, self-evolving thing.
Hmm.
And so we created the Atheopagan Society, the nonprofit organization, of which both Yucca and I are council members.
Hmm.
And
July of 2020 was our first meeting, right?
yes,
Yeah.
early July of 2020. And, that was approving bylaws and articles of incorporation and blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of technical stuff that has to be done to create a group like that. But we got recognized by the federal government as a religious organization.
Right.
Donations are tax deductible.
We did all that stuff of so much paperwork and figuring out
Yes.
bank accounts and
Yeah, getting a bank account open turned out to be really kind of a nightmare.
a ridiculous amount of like weird information that they needed.
I think it's Patriot Act stuff. I think
Yeah.
they're concerned about nonprofits fostering terrorism.
And therefore they needed your social and income and
Yeah,
all kinds of,
yeah,
yeah,
weird.
it was intense.
Just weird. But we did it. We got it done, and the council started doing stuff. There were various initiatives. The library initiative online that Robin did, for example, to create a library of resources for Atheopagans that they can download and look at, or
The clerical package as well,
yes,
right?
all the clerical and guidance as well,
right.
and the system for ordaining clerics online, because we believe that everybody should have the right to conduct marriages and so forth. And so we had an automated system on the website for people to be ordained, which is currently broken because MailChimp changed its system. But if you want to be ordained, you can use the contact form on the Atheopagan Society website, which is theapsociety.org. Send a message through the contact system, and I will get back to you and get you ordained.
Yeah. And eventually we're going to have that back up and running as an automated system, but there's just a lot of things that are getting juggled at the moment.
There are.
Yeah. And just also want to clarify, this is all volunteer.
Yeah.
Right? People are doing this out of a sense of a desire to serve the community and to really help in whatever ways we can. And we'll talk about this in a little bit. I mean, the getting everything set up for being able to have more volunteers is one of our major focuses. But just trying to figure out what each person's strengths are and how we can best help the community and how we can best serve the community has been a big focus of what we've been trying to do over the past few years. So
yeah, because it's all about supporting the people that are within the umbrella of this community in being as fulfilled as they can be, as happy as they can be, as self-actualized as they can be, as effective as they can be, which is what Atheopaganism is really about. It's about being happy, being effective in your life. We don't believe in an afterlife or any of that. Nobody's keeping score. It's all about just joy.
Yep.
And joy and service, right? And so, with that spirit, there's a real joyfulness in the work as well. I mean, when we work together, there's a sort of, oh, we're doing a great thing here feeling.
Yeah. I mean, so the council meetings are quarterly, and every single time it's just like, wow, y'all are amazing. This is awesome. Thank you so much. Oh, I'm so lucky to know such cool people. I can't believe we're doing this. Like time after time after time. And it's just, it never gets old. It's just amazing each time.
Yeah. So. And when we held the Suntree retreat, the in-person retreat in 2022, and there were 50 of us there, that was the same experience. It was like, wow, every one of these people is super cool. Right. I would like to be friends with every one of them.
Yeah. My oldest who came with me to that was like, why isn't it a week long? Why isn't it 2 weeks long? Can we just live here? Like, oh.
Things have evolved over that 11 years. I've written another book that's coming out next year. I've written in my will that the rights to my Atheopaganism book are going to go to the Atheopagan Society, so that it will always have access to that material for future people that want to practice Atheopaganism. So there'll never be any argument about, who has the rights to any of this stuff. We've done a lot. We launched the the YouTube,
So we've got the media team working on this, yeah.
right?
Um, and I want to say the story. So you've told your your thread of the story, right?
Yes,
But
yes,
this is a community of thousands of people now, and we
right.
each have our own thread of this story that's weaving together, right? And together we're making this larger thing. And I really value that the wisdom in going, okay, let's make sure that this isn't just about one particular personality. This is
Yeah.
all of ours, right? And again, that's one of the things that the council's trying to figure out how to do is how do we make this something that is sustained, that keeps going, that lives past just any of individuals of us,
Hmm.
right?
Yes, yes. And it's very egalitarian,
Yeah,
where we're not going to have, different degrees or levels or priesthood or any of that kind of stuff. When people choose to be ordained and become what's called an Atheopagan cleric, that's a service role. That
right.
means I've committed to provide particular kinds of service in my community. It doesn't mean I'm a muckety muck now and I get to tell other people what to do. We don't have that.
Right. And same thing with the council, right?
Yeah.
Again, the council is just, it really is a service position. Just because somebody's on the council and someone else isn't on the council, the person on the council, they're valued. They're not more important than anyone else. They're just in a position of that volunteer. Um,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So, we've built so much over this time. Oh, and I want to mention, because we have two wonderful volunteers that are doing it, Instagram as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That are part of the media team. We've got a couple of folks that are doing wonderful Instagram stuff as well. And someone created an Atheopaganism Reddit subreddit
Oh, nice.
out of the blue, a person who I didn't know. And that was kind of miraculous to stumble across.
That's great.
Yeah, sort of propagating itself out into the world.
And we don't have an official TikTok, but there are some folks from the community who are on TikTok, and you can find, you can search through the hashtag of Atheopagan, you'll come up with, Robin's channel and a couple of other folks who
Right.
have that conversation.
We
So
do have an account,
yes, but we
but we
don't
never
really,
post anything.
yeah, and if that's somebody's passion, hey, talk to
Let,
us on the media team. We'd love,
yeah.
each of the different platforms kind of have their own system and culture and all of that. So yes, thank you for pointing out. We have one. We just don't, we aren't doing it on a regular basis at this point.
Right.
Because one of the
So,
things we have to do is figure out that we are, in fact, human and have a limited amount of time and space and spoons, as they say, and where do we use them?
right.
So,
Yeah. And that's actually a perfect opportunity for me to thank you, Yucca, for your 3 years of service as the chair of the Ethiopian Society Council. You did a tremendous amount of work and modeled a tone and a can-do kind of attitude and level-headedness that I think just really served us so well. And I totally understand that it was time for you to step down, and John has stepped up, and that's all great.
yeah. It
A
was a
a
huge honor, so thank you. Yeah, it's really, and I look forward to continue to serve in different ways in the coming
uh-huh.
years. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So all these things have happened, all these incredible things over the last 11 years. And now we look to the future.
Hmm.
The Atheopagan Society is creating its first strategic plan.
Hmm.
And a strategic plan is basically just narrowing our focus down to a few goals that we're going to that we're going to seek to accomplish over the next couple of years.
Right.
And that's where we're going to invest our time and our energy and our money in order to accomplish those things. Our money, vast.
Yes, our vast resources.
Yes, I think we have $5,000 right now. I think that's
I don't think
something
we
like
quite
that.
have. That's what we did last time, but I think we've had quite a few expenses
Oh, that's
since.
true. You're right.
Yes,
Yeah, we have had
there's
expenses. So yeah, it's probably more like 4,500. But it's enough because we operate
and
we
there and we
operate with volunteers.
yeah, and donations. And so there's some folks
Yes,
who
and
donate on a
donations.
regular basis, and that makes doing those things possible, right?
It
So we
does.
really, really value that.
Because we do have regular expenses. We have to pay for things like Zoom and MailChimp and, all that kind of stuff.
Hosting for, all of
Right.
that. Yeah.
For the blog. Yeah. So the strategic plan is going to be finalized at our autumnal equinox meeting coming up after September 21st. I think it's October 5th, I think is the next meeting.
Oh, we'd have to look at, yeah, it's somewhere around there.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Do you want to mention the three? We're
Yes,
finalizing it, but we've got the idea of what our goals are.
we've narrowed the goals down to three things, and they are, first of all, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging.
Hmm.
We want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make our spaces feel safe and inclusive and welcoming to everyone. Uh, as long as they share our values. If they're Nazis, we don't want them to feel welcome. We want them to go somewhere else. But certainly for people in marginalized communities, we want to make sure that we're really uplifting those voices and making sure that people feel safe and welcome in those
Right.
spaces.
And just being really, really conscious about that and
Yeah.
really clear about that. Yeah.
So that's the first. And the second is, what is the second?
Well, the steady engagement and growth. Yeah.
Right, right. The fostering of engagement between Atheopagans.
Hmm.
So more in the way of online opportunities like the conference, the virtual conference that we held this past spring.
Hmm.
In-person opportunities like the Sun Tree Retreat that we're going to do another one of in 2024.
Hmm. Which is a little less than a year away because it's in September this year, right?
Yes, so it's a
Next
little
year.
more than
Yeah.
it's a little more
Yeah.
than a
Just a,
year away. Yeah,
yeah.
but we're
On
going to
another
have
full
to.
moon, I believe.
Yes,
Didn't we end up getting another full moon?
we
Yeah.
did. So we're going to start working on that, right after Labor Day. The issue there is really, and also I didn't mention this, but we have a program of affinity groups now.
Hmm.
Some of which are geographically based, so they can get together in person
Hmm.
because they all come from a particular region. Some of them are interest based, like there's an LGBTQ group, there's a BIPOC group, there's a gardening group, there's a crafting group, things
Right.
like that, right?
Hmm.
So creating opportunities and providing resources to help groups like affinity groups to get together in person, build interpersonal relationships, because community is a big thing that religion is about.
Hmm.
And as wonderful as online community is, in person is better.
Hmm.
And we'd like for people to have opportunities for that if they want them.
Right. Yeah. So for both, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And there being a steady component, and we'll talk about this in the next goal as well, but we don't want to kind of explode and spread too quickly and then collapse, right? So we're
Right.
really working on how to do this in a way that is sustainable.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the third big area, which is creating infrastructure and support for volunteers so that we don't have burnout. We're always, drawing in new leadership and new voices and new participation so that nobody has to sit in the same position for 10 years and get real tired of it.
Hmm.
And I mean, that's just good for us in all kinds of ways because, having a variety of different perspectives, it just helps our approach to be that much more nuanced, that much more considerate. It's just good for us all the way
Right.
around.
Yeah.
So those are the three big areas. And you'll notice that none of them involves some big, huge growth initiative. We have never been a proselytizing spiritual community, and we're not. My philosophy around this is I would like people to be aware of this as an opportunity that they can take if they want to. I would never tell them you should be an Atheopagan.
Right.
I would never say that to any.
Yeah. Because I think it's a wonderful option, but it's not the only thing out there. Lots of things
Nope.
work for lots of different people, and I'm just grateful that we've got a community of incredible people who really love and care for each other and work together and can, share these values and use
Absolutely.
a similar framework. And yet, as we've talked about in so many other podcasts, are also so very different in so many
Mhm.
delightful ways.
Right. And we encourage that diversity, right? Like, there isn't this mandated wheel of the year where, the symbols are all the same and the rituals are all the same. No, you create for yourself what's meaningful for you and relates to what nature is doing at a given time of year where you are.
Hmm.
So there's a tremendous amount of freedom within Atheopaganism. It's meant to be facilitative and supportive and kind of informing rather than directive.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that's where we're going. That's the idea there.
And it's a fun process.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. And fun people to do it with.
Mhm.
So that's all to the good as well.
Yeah.
I mean, having not had any comprehension of arriving here 11 years ago, I have no idea where we might be 10, 11 years from now.
Right.
It's hard to imagine what that could be like.
Oh,
Um,
we'll be an ancient group in neo-pagan years at that point,
that
right?
oh, that's true. Yeah, we'll be
Yeah.
almost Bronze Age.
Yes.
Uh,
I guess then we'll be legitimate, right? Because we'll be
right.
a
Well, yeah, we'll be Silicon Age, and by that time it'll all be molecular computing or quantum computing. And then we can look back nostalgically at our silicon chips, and yes, we'll be the old established
Oh,
version.
that's quite funny to think of.
It
Um,
is. It is.
but yeah. All
So
right.
yeah, I'd like to thank everyone that has played a part in or participated in or joined, for however long, because some people have decided that it wasn't for them and gone off to do something else. All those people who have played a role in where we've arrived and what we've been able to achieve in serving people, in really working to help people be happier and help the world be a better place.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So thank you to all you listeners. That counts. That
Absolutely. We
that
are so
absolutely counts.
grateful that you are all here and yeah,
Yeah. It's
spending this
all
time with us.
yeah, it's a real honor. And we know that of all the things that people can donate to a movement or a cause, time is the most precious.
Yeah.
You know, the number of people that will contribute to an organization, for example, is always much higher than the number that will volunteer for the organization.
Hmm.
So, when you give us 30, 40 minutes a week out of your day, that's a very meaningful thing. And we recognize it and we appreciate it.
Right.
So with that, here's to the next 11 years.
And we'll see you next week.
Welcome to The Wonder, exploring perspectives, rituals, and observances of modern naturalistic, earth-revering, pagan religious paths. Here are your hosts, Yucca and Mark.